Major breaking news to tell you about at this hour. Right now, we have learned that the Supreme Court is going to be hearing the former president's presidential immunity appeal. This would further delay his trial. Major news again, just crossing. This just came in. So again, the Supreme Court is agreeing to hear Trump's immunity claims. And this means that those arguments will be set for April. Pretty big deal. Of course, we heard earlier that they had heard the case with Colorado, of course, having tried to keep him off of the ballot. That didn't really get that far. Immediately, they took that one up. And it looks like, again, we'll see how that all shakes down. It does look like we will, in fact, see perhaps a unanimous agreement on that one. But it's one of many cases, right, that are up, that he's facing. This one being a pretty big deal because he's arguing that he had immunity. In other words, he could take whatever documents he wanted to take from the White House. He also is arguing that, he is not somehow responsible for what went down on J6 because he has this immunity claim. So the defense, they've been kind of stalling this here. The presidential immunity defense has been stalling the case for nearly 3 months, missed the original scheduled March 4th trial date. The high court's decision automatically stays lower courts from moving forward in the case. The court in this particular situation is also granting special counsel Jack Smith's request that President Trump petition, or his petition, I should say, for a stay to be treated as a petition for review. And so now it looks like the case is going to be set for oral arguments beginning April 22nd. The parties have been instructed here to limit the arguments apparently to the question of, quote, whether and if so, to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office. Now, this is pretty interesting to me because it can kind of get a little bit complicated. In other words, where do you draw the line? A president ought to have a certain amount of immunity, should they not? Because some of the things that they're going to do, not everybody's going to like. I mean, I don't think everybody really likes the fact that Joe Biden turned over some $6 billion to Iran just weeks before the attack happened in Israel. I don't think that went over very well with people. Do you go back and do you prosecute him for that? Or does he have immunity in that case? In this particular situation, whether you're talking about J6 or whether you're talking about, him taking documents which he believes were declassified and he had the right to declassify them as president, at some point, the crime has to fit the punishment. And if you're talking about, okay, we're going to go after him for J6, exactly how did he try to overthrow things officially on that day? I mean, I do believe that Secret Service told him he couldn't actually go over to the Capitol building, but they're saying, because he didn't do enough, because he didn't calm everybody down enough, that somehow he's liable for that. I mean, look, it's certainly fascinating from a legal standpoint, and I'm getting up to speed on all of my legal stuff, as many of you guys are too, because this is just another example here. So the timeline has been really interesting, only in that the timeline has been very geared towards putting this all towards the election cycle. The left has believed all along that the more that they could show, this is a bad guy because look, he's always in court, he's always in trouble, that somehow Americans would be like, okay, yeah, he's too much of a headache. That's too much for me to handle. But in fact, it's had absolutely positively the opposite effect. And we've seen poll after poll after poll, even most recently. Now he's up 6 points nationwide. It had been 5 points just a couple of weeks ago. It's like no matter what they throw at him, the stronger he emerges. And the question is, does that actually hold through to Election Day? This is just amazing, amazing stuff. So let me quote here from the order, which reads, quote, without expressing a view on the merits, this court directs the Court of Appeals to continue withholding issuance of the mandate until the sending down of the judgment of this court. The Supreme Court, of course, that's referring to when it had dismissed the application for a stay as moot because granting that would have effectively halted the lower court proceedings. Don't forget, Jack Smith wanted to move forward with this. he wanted to bypass the appellate court. I mean, there's just whole kinds of complications going on. But I think the bottom line, as we can assess in this particular moment in time, is that this immunity clause is going to be really front and center. And it's a big question of how presidents are treated in the future. I want to quote from our friends over at Epoch Times, who were really quick on this story, I should point out. They say, quote, "The concept of presidential immunity was defined by the Supreme Court in a 1982 case where a fired military contractor sued former President Richard Nixon after he lost the job. And the High Court ruled a president's immunity from civil suits was absolute and that it extended to the outer perimeter of his office. Now, President Trump's attorneys are arguing that his actions on January 6 were part of his official duties as president, pointing to his record of taking election integrity seriously. So prosecutors in this case, they say, are arguing that President Trump has no immunity in this case because it is a criminal case. And so that is the distinction that they are trying to make. Now, the Supreme Court has never addressed this issue of criminal prosecution. So this is certainly untested legal territory. I mean, like everything these days, right? Completely untested stuff. Unbelievable. But again, I just want to bring this news to you. We were actually intending to start with some other stuff, but just before coming to air, we got word that the Supreme Court is agreeing to hear Donald Trump's immunity claim. And now this claim is going to be set for April. So we're going to have an interesting couple of months ahead. Did we not, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, super interesting stuff. And again, all of this just breaking down and coming to us live right now. Supreme Court saying that if Donald Trump must stand trial in 2020 election conspiracy case, the lower courts rejected the former president's claim of immunity for seeking to subvert Biden's claim. This is all now just coming to us from the Wall Street Journal. Forgive me, all in real time. So I'm reading to you from the Wall Street Journal. The Supreme Court agreeing to consider whether Donald Trump must stand trial on charges he plotted to overturn the 2020 election after the lower courts rejected his claim that he is entitled to absolute immunity because he was president at the time. Again, I just want to reiterate that it is totally uncharted territory. As I pointed out, there was the Nixon case, but that was not criminal. They say the distinction in this particular one is they are accusing him of a crime here related to January 6th. So never a dull moment